Hey guys, let me know if I'm audible, and I'll start the session if I'm audible. Guys, let me know if I'm audible. Okay, great. So I'm assuming I'm audible, so I'll just start the session. So today's session is all about the planning. I'll give you a little bit of the idea for the project that we're going to make this time. So the website that this project will live on is giganoto.com. If you go to giganoto.com, you'll find that the website will be down because we will be putting it up in these sessions. So I have bought the domain like more than a year ago, or maybe more than that. So I cannot show you that part, but it is super simple. It's like buying something on Amazon, right? So buying a domain is not anything technical. You can just do it very easily if you have any debit card or credit card. And what we'll be doing is we'll be creating a very super simple platform where you guys or basically whole community can log in. We'll have roles for learners, we'll have leaderboard, and we'll have chapters and courses and all those things, and we'll do it like one step at a time. When we are doing this in the first few session, okay, we'll start with the beta version with super simple features, not something fancy, and think of it as a tutorial also, so that I am making this in the sense of a tutorial so that you can also contribute eventually, because most of the community is beginner, so I don't want to start with with any assumptions basically. So that's the plan. The tech stack will be Python and Flask, and on the front end it will be React JS, and we will be doing unit testing and functional testing and integration testing, CI/CD setup, and all those kind of things. And the backend will be running on AWS instead of something like Firebase. Initially, I was thinking to do it on Firebase so that it's super simple to do and easy to achieve in terms of end product, and do not depend so much on the community. But I thought it's better to do it on AWS for two reasons. One is the flexibility that AWS gives you, which is not as as less as Firebase. Firebase kind of have some constraints, and you have to really explore to figure out few things. Although it does you end up doing things way faster in Firebase, and there is a lot of abstraction in Firebase from a backend perspective. So I wanted you to understand like how things work behind the scenes, and understand the core principles and things when it comes to setting up a backend in a cloud, and then talk about things like scalability, security, and even reliability, in the sense that if things go down, how you can make sure that things don't go down, what is high availability. And although we will not have a very scalable and highly available app, because that will cost me a lot, and it's not a problem for the community right now because the community is quite small, but hopefully it will grow and eventually we'll have those problems. So we'll tackle them then and there. So the idea for today's episode is to understand like how we are going to do all this. What's the plan? Okay, what's the tech stack? In the sense, for example, there are multiple things that I haven't told yet. For example, for testing, what we'll be using, and will we using Docker or not, things like that. And then what's the few first steps? What are we going to build? What's the plan for this week, and things like that. So that's what I'm going to cover today. And yeah, before I jump into that, let me see some of your chat and figure out if you guys have any question. So Somnath is saying, I will be making a clone of this website with understanding of each line of code. You don't have to clone it. You can actually literally create pull requests on the same code base, because most probably, if not all the lines, most of the important stuff will be covered in these sessions. I'll be coding live, so you will know like why is something written, why is something as a choice, what are the different choices that you can make. And I'll keep it super simple. I'll not start with something super complex assuming that it is a better app, so let me make those choices. I'll go with super simple stuff so that it's not overwhelming for you, although eventually we'll be moving for production ready stuff. But the idea is to keep it like a tutorial initially. And because I want the community to take over these projects instead of me working on it. So that's why the reason is that I'm going to do it as in the tutorial form, and eventually you can go ahead and take the ownership of the whole thing. There is one more question again from Somnath, and the question is, why do you name this Giganoto? For curiosity. Okay, so he's asking for only curiosity purpose, that why it's called Giganoto. There is no particular very strong reason. I feel Giganoto is a catchy name. It has so many like vowels, and it's something that people can remember easily. That's what the whole point was. And I wanted so there is this animal thing, okay, that in the open source community people use animals as their what you call, I am forgetting the word, as a representation, let's say, for now. Okay, I'm forgetting the name. You can see that in Linux as a penguin. You can see that in like, I think Postgres, it's I think it's elephant, and then you will see in Go they have their own creature, and I think for GitHub it's octopus. Okay, for Docker it's whale. So in the same sense, I did with, I would say, a dinosaur, and that dinosaur is Giganotosaurus. And if you find Giganotosaurus, you'll see that it was a huge dinosaur. And I would say Giganotosaurus.com would have been a difficult thing to type, and people would have made a lot of mistakes, right? So I made it more like Giganoto instead of Giganotosaurus. So that's the idea. But yeah, nothing. It has no deep meaning in the sense of like what it represents. It's kind of like Giganoto.com could have been anything instead of a learning platform. Okay, so let me just dive into the planning part now. So I'll go to this. So let's jump into the planning part. What's the plan for this week, and what's the bigger plan here? Okay, let me talk about the bigger plan first, and then let me jump into the weekly plan, and then we'll talk about what we should do to have this weekly plan. How are we managing it, who is responsible for what, how can you contribute, and things like that. Let's see. So let's talk about the big plan first, right? So the idea for the big plan is that this is a platform which uses not just my tutorials or my videos or things like that, but a lot of other resources, because my content is going to be free, right? So we can use other free resources also to combine those and create a structure, so that in an kind of amalgamation in a way, I would say, in the combination, okay, combining those things and my stuff, we try to find a big picture and try to make sure there are no holes, and it's fun, and you get more perspective. And I'm not reinventing the wheel. For example, if somebody has a great tutorial on YouTube when it comes to CSS, or a nice blog, I'll rather embed that in a tutorial instead of recreating something, right? I'm not creating a web development tutorial. This is just an example. Okay. So that's the idea. Sometimes it might be even from some MOOC. Okay. It can be some university lecture from Stanford or Harvard or MIT or whatever. And maybe I'm just interested in a chunk, that from this timestamp to this timestamp, this is very meaningful, and I really want this to be watched before I cover this particular topic. So our particular courses will have those embeddings, and you can cover things lesson by lesson. And then the bigger thing is, I want people to experiment with stuff. I want them to go through learning by doing instead of just watching tutorials and all those things. So that's the big thing. Okay, so let me write some stuff. First is curation. Okay, which basically means other stuff, right? Other stuff that I haven't created. Okay, so curation is a big deal, because there is so much good stuff online there, which so we can end up even creating courses that have no content from my side, right? Because maybe there is no need. So why do something when there is no need, right? So the platform should act like an isolated individual thing, that is not just a curation but also a learning by doing platform that kind of acts. Okay, so learning by doing. Okay, and this is super important. This is the soul of the whole thing. The problem YouTube tutorials don't work so well is because we end up either just watching them or watching and copy pasting the whole thing, and we do not ask ourselves the hard questions. So this learning by doing thing is to engage you more, in the sense of asking the difficult questions, maybe in the form of baby steps, and not making it too difficult that you get stuck. But like your brain should be engaged, your cognition should be engaged. There should be a minor cognitive load when you're going through the journey, so that you know that you're learning, right? It's not that, oh, I watched a tutorial, maybe if I watch 10 tutorials I'll be good enough. No. When you take a course, by the end of the course you should know that you're good at it. Okay, you don't need any other course, you don't need to watch any other tutorial series or something like that. So learning by doing should solve that, right? And the third is there should be some sense of achievement, right? So we should introduce something like a virtual currency. So this is a big plan, right? We are not doing it any soon. This can be a blockchain currency. This can be anything, right? We'll see. But we will introduce virtual currency, and then we will also introduce two other things. One is badge, okay, just to show like what rank you have in that sense. And the other is leaderboard, okay. And leaderboards can be like weekly, it can be weekly also, and overall also, like who is number one overall. And then the last thing that I really want to introduce is that's the part of thing that's more like a second last thing. So I want to create an admin UI, so that anybody who is admin can add content, okay, can add new content. And then the last thing that I want to have is basically community interaction. What does that mean? That's a difficult thing to implement, but very important. So this whole platform should not feel isolated. What happens in most of the platforms is that they work in isolation. Okay, like when you go to a platform, it doesn't feel, you don't even know how many people are learning the same thing right now, who they are, what they are going through, and all those things, right? So what this community interaction will be, that you can find people to learn from, learn with, and you can have profiles of people. Okay, you can chat with them, maybe even video call with them. Okay, so we will eventually add these things. Obviously this will require a higher budget, right? Infrastructure wise on AWS. So it will totally depend on how large the community is, and we will see. Like if I have to put my own money to do that, I don't mind it, but the community has to first grow till that point that this is even meaningful. Because if there is only like 10 to 15 people interacting, 10 to 15 people just using this platform, it doesn't mean to it doesn't make sense to have so many features and so many courses. It should grow with the community, because it will be the community taking care of these features and taking care of these courses. It's not me, right? So if the community is not large enough, these things will not be implemented, because out of 15 people, only maybe one person on a practical level, right, will be implementing things. But we might need like 100 people. So if we maintain the ratio, that makes 1500 active users on the platform, if we need 100 people who actually go and code the stuff, right? And that's the optimistic ratio actually. Okay, 1 out of 15. It will be way less actually in real life. So that's the whole plan. It's a large plan, I know. Okay, and this is more of a dream project, to be honest. I have tried implementing this. I have actually implemented half of it earlier, and that used to run on what you call bare metal server. Okay, not cloud, because cloud is way costly than bare metal. But I have realized that cloud is more reliable, especially if you want to have different kind of services and different kind of architecture, and you want to have more reliability, you want to scale better. Cloud provides a lot of tools which bare metal, basically it's all your responsibility. So yeah, although cloud is costly, it has all the reasons to be costly too. So this is the big plan. Okay, first is curation, that we will be taking content from other places and not just our content, because it makes sense. If there is something good on YouTube, why not embed that? Let the person have the views, no problem, right? We are not doing it for views. So embed what is good. Do not create something that is not needed, that is already there, right? Learning by doing, which is basically a platform where you practice the skills that you're learning on the fly. If you learn one thing, the second chapter should be, or the second lesson, chapter is the wrong word, the second lesson from a single chapter should be trying and doing the same thing, instead of just knowing the theory and just looking at a tutorial. Only then you can proceed. Actually, the platform will not allow you to proceed in content unless you have proved that you know the previous content. Then there is a concept of virtual currency, which can be just virtual completely, or it can be a blockchain thing, and it can have some meaning, it can have some value. Maybe you can buy things like mugs or t-shirts or stickers from that virtual currency. We'll see about that. Badges and leaderboards is more like a ranking and a table of people who are doing extraordinary, and this leaderboard can be even local. For example, it can show how people did in last 1 day or 1 hour, or depends on the amount of people using the platform, right? 1 hour makes sense only when there is good number of people using the platform. Admin UI is basically admin UI is not just admin UI, it's more like admin UI and admin API, right? It's the place where we will be creating content, right? And admin doesn't mean that it should be me. It's a role. A lot of people can have that role, right? But we do not want anybody to just randomly create content, because we need quality control, right? We need to have consistency. For example, if you see free code camp, you'll see there is no consistency. There is no consistency in the style of writing. There is no consistency in the structure. Okay. There is too much user personality. There is too much author personality in every single blog. So I don't want that. I want consistency, and it should feel more professional. So that's why I don't want it to be super open. If you see a similar concept, you'll see in Wikipedia, it has a strong consistency. Okay, although so many people can contribute, they put a lot of a lot of stress on consistency of style and of structuring. So that's something I want. We have to establish rules and regulations for that, because if there is no consistency, the quality will drop, and then there will be high cognitive load for a learner. Community interaction is again just voice, text, and maybe video conversation, that a group of people who are learning same thing, or two individuals, so that they can interact. So it's more like a social networking part of this thing, right? So that people can communicate and chat better, because what happens most of the time is people either go to Slack or Discord or Twitter and try to interact with the same community, but then there is that segregation of interaction, like you're learning something somewhere and you're interacting somewhere, and it becomes too difficult. You are not able to find the right people. They're trying to solve two different problems, right? So community interaction is a difficult thing, but I think it's an important thing to solve. Let's talk about this week. So for just this week, what we'll be working on is the admin UI. Okay, I keep on saying admin UI, but it's more like admin UI API, right? So this is where we'll create a UI to add content, right? And API is nothing but making sure you are authorized to do so, plus save stuff in DB, right? Save in DB. That's the whole thing. So this is a UI where you add content, and this content goes to this API, and this API makes sure that you have the authorization. You are basically an admin, right? Because front end is just front end. So backend needs to make sure that you are who you are telling to be, which is basically an admin, and you are able to save once there is some checks and balances on the content. Once it passes through those checks and balances, we'll just save it in DB, because when we have the learning platform UI, this is the DB that will be called, right? This will be the DB where the read operations will happen. So it's interesting to see that this is the admin UI is responsible for a CRUD, right? Create, read, update, delete. Whereas the other UI, which is the main UI, which will be the heavy UI, will only be doing read operations. Okay, because the learner will come to see the content. They are not going to update or delete or create content, right? So a small UI do the CRUD operation, but a large UI will just do the read operations, right? Although it will be connected to other different DBs, the large UI, which is the learning UI, because that learning UI will have user data, right? Who is learning what they are at, and do they have a badge, what badge they have, virtual currency or whatever, right? So that will be connected to other different DBs, but content wise, that part it will just do the read operations. So that's the idea. Now how do we go about it, right? So if you go to GitHub, and you will find this particular place in GitHub, which is github/github-com, right? This particular organization, you'll see that I have created two repositories. One is UI and the other is backend. Okay, and this particular UI is more of a UI for the main UI, which is the heavy UI. So I will be creating one more UI which can be like admin UI. For backend, I'm thinking I'll keep admin backend and normal backend in the same place. Okay, because they will end up talking to the same DB, which is the content DB, and I don't have to implement the authentication part twice, because even the user UI, which is the heavy UI, the platform UI, the learner platform UI, even that will have authentication. Because if you're not authenticated, how will we know who is learning what and what? Because when you come next time, we want you to continue where you left, and that can only happen when you have a login. Because a cookie can only live for a while, and if you switch platform, then we will not know that you are the same person. So to make sure that you have that consistent user experience, we need you to have a login. And it's good in the sense that there are not spiders that are just like scraping our content, but although if somebody just creates a login, and scraping is easy even if we do login, but scraping is not the worry, right? Yeah, so that's the idea. What else? So let me do one thing. I'll create one more repository, okay, which is admin UI. And I'll if you are on my Discord, I'll give very minor small tickets. So I want you guys to practice creating a pull request. Okay, so you can clone this repository to your local. I'm not teaching you GitHub, okay? I'm not teaching you Git. So what you have to do is you have to learn how to clone the repository, how to make very small changes, like a readme changes kind of thing. Okay, I'll create a bogus file where you can just say that this is my name and this is who I am and this is what I do and whatever, right? We can use that file as a backend, DB seeding file. What does that mean? So what I'll take from you is your name, is your email ID that is hosted on Google, such as gmail.com, right? And a description of you, who you are. And what will we do is that everybody can add one line to a particular file and create a pull request. So they will learn how to create a pull request. And yet when this file have like 10 or 20 entries, right? What will we do is read that file to create user logins from that particular file or user profiles from that particular file. So you will see that whatever you contributed has some meaning. It's not just like a random pull request, right? So that is why I'm saying seeding, like it acts as a seed for DB. So we can do that. So I want you to learn how to create a pull request, so it can become like meaningful in that sense. What else? I will be creating an admin UI, right? Admin UI repository, and I will let you know like what file that will be, where you have to create this particular pull request and how to do it and all that stuff. So that shouldn't be a big issue. Other than that, for the live coding part, what can we do today, right? So I was thinking I'll do one thing. Since we are doing the front end first, right? We will be working on the admin UI first and the admin API later. Let's do one thing. Let's have a bogus API today, so that when we create our UI, there should be a local API to work with to see that this is called mock API. When you're programming, what happens is when you work in a proper setup, okay, let me come here, let me show you what I'm talking about. So even in professional projects, okay, production level code, and you have large teams and everything, what happens sometimes is that for front end people, back end people or front end people themselves create a mock API, okay, and let me erase this. Okay, I don't know why it's detecting my hand also. So what does mock API do is it has the same input and same output as the proper API, but the computation is missing. They actually nothing happening in between, okay. If there is like a minimal step that you need to take to do this output part, you do that, but you try to do the least that you can do, okay. Sometimes it literally work on hard-coded input that provides hard-coded output, okay, which means that you say that, okay, if this is the input, give this the output, and if you give any other input, it just breaks or gives always the same output, right? So why people do this? Because when front-end people are creating their UI and things like that, they interact with API to maybe render something on the UI, and they need that API, right? But the proper API is not yet ready, or maybe it's the same team, like it's a 5 or 6 people engineering team, and they're all full stack, and they have decided to do the front end first, and they say that, okay, let's do the mock API first and use that mock API to do the front end thing, and later on we'll just replace the mock API with the real API, okay. So the some of you might be thinking like, what is this API? Okay, API is nothing, basically it's a server, and API is basically, you can think of it as the request that you send to the server and the response that you get from server. You say that, okay, give me this stuff, or do this, create a new user, okay. So when you do all these requests and you get responses, right, there is something happening on the server code is running and doing all this. So instead of creating this large big engine, right, you end up creating a very small engine of backend, right, and which pretends to be this, which do this request response. If this takes 2 months, this literally takes like 5 hours, right, because this is bogus. This is just pretending it to act like one, right? And you will see when we create mock APIs, you will see that how fast we'll create the mock APIs, and when we do the real backend, you'll see how much time it takes, right? Like huge difference. And then the UI interacts with this. Once we are like 90% sure about the UI, we just switch, work on this either parallelly or sequentially, depends on the team and the structure, and we just switch from this mock API to the real API once that's ready, right? And then we do integration test, which is basically checking that whole thing works, UI plus backend works, and all the user stories, which is basically all the possible user actions that user can take on the UI, they act properly, and test all the things. Basically you make sure that the whole application works, right? And once you have that confidence, you launch your product. And because it's a long process, people normally start with the minimalistic features, right? The minimum number of features that they have, that acts either as a proof of concept, POC, or as your beta version, that okay, this is the minimum features that we need to do in this version, and then these are the features that we'll do in the next version, and this and that, right? And in software, versioning also happens in this particular format. You'll see it many places, something dot something dot something, okay, and these are numbers, right? These are generally numbers, and let's say 2 dot 12 dot 15, okay. So what happens is, this is called major version, this is called minor version, and this is called patch, right? So normally if there is a bug or there is some minor, super minor stuff, like really minor, right? Then you end up increasing this to .16 and you release. Okay, if people do not go from 15 to 16, not a big deal, right? And then there is might be a smaller feature or a good enough bug that you want to address. Maybe it's a security bug, not a security bug, it might be a security bug but not very high risk. Okay, because if it's super high risk, then your major version kind of changes. It totally depends on the software company actually. Okay, so it's you increase it to actually 13, right? If it's little bit more than just a patch, and if it's a lot of features, new features, literally like a big thing, okay, you're adding, you can also think of it this as like few days of work, right? This may be like few weeks of work, but this might be like months to years of work, right? So you increase in that thing major version, right? And you do not keep this as 13.16, they become like .0.0 when you increase the major version, right? So you might have seen in software that you download this particular format. We most probably won't do it because I think most probably we'll just have major versions and have cool code names for the major version. For the minor and patch kind of things, we'll just deploy our app on the go. Like we can have, if a particular pull request is accepted to be merged, we as soon as the pull request is merged, the CI/CD will just deploy that, right? So we'll not have a blocker in that sense. And for major version, we'll just we'll see. So there is something called as a staging deployment versus a production deployment, but I don't want to overwhelm and don't want to complicate our pipeline too much right now. Let's keep it simple for now and eventually add that kind of complexity, right? So now what I can do is I can do this maybe minor API thing, right? And give you a taste of maybe Flask, right? And let's just see, right? So what I'll do, I'll just go to my terminal. So if you have Linux, this is the kind of terminal you'll have. I mean, it won't look that cool, but it just looks cool. It's nothing different about this. Okay, it's the same thing. It also does ls when you say ls, right? So all that stuff. So what I'll do is I'll create mkdir Giganoto, right, and go inside it. So here I'll have all my repositories for Giganoto. So I'll go here and I'll go to backend, right? So in the backend, let me switch to Chrome. So if you see, I was here, okay, I was at giganoto.com organization. I clicked on the backend, and then in the backend you'll see that I have only like a git ignore, a license, and a readme file. Okay, what is the readme file? Readme file is basically instructions for people who are using this code, and readme .md means markdown. Okay, and you can see that readme is rendered on the GitHub, right? And it is basically a small documentation that is super important to get started with the project or give you the idea of what that project is and all that stuff. So it's always good to have readme. License is not super important thing if you're doing open source and you don't care what people do with your code. Okay, so if you really care and you want to like maybe in future have a legal case against people if they do not do according to your license, then it makes more sense. For me, I have put a license which is very relaxed. You can literally do anything with this code, doesn't matter. And then there is a git ignore file which basically does what the name says, git ignore. So when you're adding stuff to your Git repository, there might be some kind of files that you do not want to go to your repository, right? You want that when you're blindly saying that add my stuff to Git, maybe you do not want, or you do not want some kind of files to go on that particular repository. Think of it as, if you are comfortable with Node, those might be Node modules, right? Those are the packages that you're installing locally. You do not want like 300 MB of packages to go to GitHub, which is kind of stupid, right? You want only your source code to go. If your installation related things that everybody needs to do individually and they live in the same folder, you don't want that to go and add up, right? You just want code to go. So basically the idea is only my code should go, and then you can also customize git ignore to maybe have maybe make sure that some files do not go to Git. Maybe there is a JSON file, which is not a good idea though, but let's say you have a JSON file which contains password, right? Email and password. This is my Gmail email and this is my Gmail password, and you have that file. So you can add that to git ignore and make sure that GitHub never pushes that particular file. Although that's not a very good idea, but yeah, people end up people do that. I have done that in past, so it's not big deal unless it's your private email and your life depends on it in some sense. So that's the idea. What I'll do now, I am here, right? I'll go to the code part, and I can just clone this. So for me, what is this GitHub CLI? Okay, so I'll just copy this and I'll come to my terminal. So I have copied it. I'll go to the terminal now and I'll say git clone this, right? And it says cloning into backend. So you will not need email password kind of combination or any credentials to clone this, because this is a public repository, right? But if you try to push on this, you will not be able to push. Public repository means that read operation of that code is available for public. You do not need login. You do not need any role or anything, right? But write operations are still restricted, because if random people just end up writing, where is the sanity, right? People will go crazy. Like, I created a open source repository and anybody is coming and writing anything, right? You need that control at least. So that's where pull requests come. You want to say that, okay, I want to contribute this particular part to your repository. Can I please do it? And it becomes a request for the authors or a particular group of people on that particular repository that have access to give that write operation to them. They look at that particular request, which is called a pull request. They look at what you're doing. So sometimes you'll see that in open source projects, they have a particular format where you tell like what this is, what it solves, what kind of thing it is solving. Is it a bug? What is it linked to? It might be linked to a particular issue that was already existing, right? And most of the time you cannot create a pull request if the issue is not there. A issue is just a mention of the problem in a particular place in GitHub. We will also have something like that, because it's easier to track. Because if you're writing code and you want me to read the code first to understand what it does, that becomes very annoying, right? So it's better to link it to something. So I already know what this code should be solving. So I see that issue and I see that, okay, this is what it is solving, right? And then read that code in that context and decide that is it good enough to be merged into it, right? And what happens is, in a pull request, people can come and comment and request changes. They can say that, oh, this is not a good variable name, you should change this to this, or why are you doing this is super slow, do this, right? These kind of things, or this is buggy, have you tested this, things like that. So you get a lot of feedback, and when you get that feedback, you update your pull request according to that feedback. And once that pull request is good enough to pass, in the sense that it can be merged into the main branch, people approve it. And once they approve it, you can go ahead and on the basis of approval, GitHub allows you, GitHub enables a button which says that merge into main. It might be for you, it might be for some other people, it depends. So whomsoever click that, the pull request get merged into main branch, which basically means that your code has now become part of the whole code, right? And it has changed the application code forever, because now your code has become a part of the main code. And then you can have triggers, and those triggers will do something like, okay, GitHub have this thing that, okay, if some pull request is merged, let me know what to do. And you can say that, okay, if a pull request is merged, you know what, run this CI/CD pipeline, so it runs some test cases on the whole code, and confirm that most of the features or important features work after this new change. And if it does, then you just deploy it to production, so people who are using the app will just see the new change, right? Sometimes they don't see because the change is not a visible thing, more of a logical thing that they will not even know. It might be just a performance thing, it might be just a refactoring where the code is just being improved from perspective of readability or good style. So that's the whole idea, and this whole thing is exactly how everybody works in their organization. This is super standard stuff, okay? This is not related to this particular code base or repository. This is how the whole world works. This is how software development works. So when you know this stuff and you practice this stuff, you are already practicing what is going to be your life as a developer, right? So being comfortable with these ideas and professional around them with behaviors actually help. That's why people like people who have contributed to open source, because that's a proof that you already understand a lot of things other than just simple coding, right? So that's the idea. What we should do now is, I have this particular backend. I'll go to this file, right? Let me make sure. Yeah, so I am here inside the backend. Let me clear this. I'll do ls, and you can see that I have the license and I have the readme file. There was also a git ignore, but it's a hidden file, so I have to do ls-a. So now I can see git ignore, and this is the git. .git is basically it's basically how git works, okay? So git has a lot of things that it needs to do as a software, and git is nothing related to GitHub, okay? Git is a bigger thing than GitHub. GitHub is just a UI platform that runs Git software on the cloud and makes life comfortable around Git. Git is an open source software, so if you want to create a company that is like GitHub, you can also do that. Git is created by the same guy who created Linux, okay, Linus Torvalds. So git has like things so that your Git operations can work. It have like hashes and diffs about like code changes that you have done. It have configs, right? All this kind of stuff. So let me not actually go into that. Now I want to set up a Python virtual environment. Why I'm doing this? I want to install some stuff, okay, for this particular project, but I don't want to install that in my main place, okay, in my main operating system. I just want to do it in this particular folder, okay? So to do that, what I'll do is I'll say Python 3.9. I have that installed. You might have just Python 3, okay, or you can just do Python version, right, and check which version is default. For me it's 2.7.16, but I do not want to create with 2.7. I want to create with Python 3, but even with Python 3 my version might be different, right? So it's 3.7.9, but I want it to be on 3.9 or 3.10, right? So if I try 3.9 and I see it says that I have 3.9, right? I can just do something like this, or I can just say which, right? And it says that this is where it is installed, right? Let me try if I have Python 3.10. Looks like I don't have Python 3.10, right? So it's your choice. You can install Python 3.10 or 3.9. I'll go with 3.9 because I already have that. Not a big deal, right? If you have Python 3.8, 3.9, 3.10, it will work, no issues, because we're not installing or using any feature that is only available in either 3.9 or 10 or something like that, right? So that's why I'm not restricting this to a particular version. So there is a tool called PyEnv, where you can just say that okay, this works in this particular Python version and I want you to install this particular Python version and all that stuff. I'm not going through that approach. I'm just going through virtual environment approach, in which I'm just saying that okay, do not install the libraries or the packages that I want to use, which are written by people, and it makes my job as a developer way easy to do, right? So I will say Python 3.9, and I will say that I want to use the module Vnv, and I want to create a virtual environment, and it can be anything. It can be Shanu, okay? But I have the habit of creating the virtual environment with the name Venv also, okay? So those two Venv are different. This second Venv is just any name for your virtual environment, okay? But because I have the habit of creating it Venv2, because when I started using Python and this thing, all the tutorials that I saw, they always called Venv, so it became a habit. So I feel very comfortable when it's Venv, okay? Although it doesn't make a difference, okay? But just to prove my point, what I'll do is I'll call it GGNT in the name of Giganoto, right? So I'll create that, and now this will try to create a virtual environment. I'll show you where it creates and how this works, okay? So now if I do a clear again and ls again, you'll see that I have a folder GGNT, okay, which is basically my virtual environment. And you ls GGNT, you'll see a few things. You'll see things like binary files, include, lib, and all that stuff, right? Which is very similar to your user directory in a Unix system, which can be Linux or Mac, right? Or you can think of it as user/local/ and then you can have bin, whatever, right? And if you go to this particular bin file, you'll see that it has pip and Python 3, right? And if I just go to Python 3, it shows me this, that there is Python 3, this and that, but I want to have more details. So I'll do ls-l, and what it says is that ggnt bin Python 3 is a soft link, okay? The L stands for the link, okay? So like how you create a shortcut in Windows, right? That the software is somewhere else, the other thing is just a shortcut to go to that particular thing. So this Python 3 is nothing but a shortcut to Python 3.9. So if I do Python 3.9, even that is a shortcut, and that shortcut is actually coming from user local opt Python 3.9 bin 3.9, right? Wherever my 3.9 was basically. Why it's happening? Because it is not trying to create a whole Python interpreter again and again just for your folder. What it is saying is that okay, there is some standard stuff such as the Python interpreter. I'll give you the same that we have in the user bin, okay? But the packages that you will install, I will not give the shortcut of that. For that, you install in the same folder. But it doesn't make sense to have too many installation of Python 3.9 because they will not be different, right? So it's better that we already have a Python 3.9. Why don't you have a soft link of that and keep it in this particular folder, which will act as if it's a user directory for bin and this and that, right? So this ggnt is basically just pretending to be my user directory. But now I have to do something to make my terminal or my bash be aware about that. Okay, this is where you have to pick my things, right? This is the place. Basically, what you have a path variable in a Nix system, right? Mac or Linux. So what I'm doing is basically I'm just saying that in my path variable, where you go and find the binaries, have this particular location also, so that when you go and find, you end up going here first, and you'll say that, oh, I got Python 3, let me use this one, right? So that's the idea. So to do that, what I have to do is I have to say source, I think, and ggnt bin, and then there is an activate file, okay? So I think I have to do that, and as soon as I do that, you'll see that I got this extra prefix, and this prefix is useful. Why? Because they just are making you aware all the time that this particular ggnt virtual environment is active. So whatever you do, if you install a package or whatever, it will be installed inside ggnt folder instead of your main thing. Because if you're just running a pip command, like just an npm command, how will you know that this is active and you're not end up installing it somewhere else, right? So npm is not a good example, because npm I think by default do it in the same folder, right? So what I'll do is, now I'll say pip install and I'll say Flask, right? And now it will install the Flask framework, micro framework, which we will use to create our backend part. And if you see, you will see that the Flask version that we have installed is 2.1.2, right? So what I'll do, I'll create a new file. I'll say require, this is standard stuff, okay, requirements.txt, and I'll just mention that, and I'll say that I want my Flask to be 2.1.2. okay. Why am I doing this? So that if somebody else is doing the setup, they can just say pip install -r requirements.txt, because all the packages that I'm going to install in future, I can just do this, because it won't be just Flask. Eventually it will become like 10-12 things, right? I do not want to remember all the names. Plus, if you end up installing different version and I end up installing different version, there might be a conflict. Some feature work for you and some feature doesn't work for me, right? So we don't want that. We want a consistent user experience from a developer perspective, right? So we end up doing this. Since I already have Flask, it will say that it's already installed, right? All requirement already satisfied, right? So now I'll make a very bogus API just to show you that things work and how things work. So I'll just create a simple app.py file. Okay, you can open this in VS Code if you want, right? But I'm just doing it on terminal, so it won't make any difference. And I can say that from Flask import Flask, which is more of a class, right? And I can say that I want an app Flask, and I want to give it a name which is the name of the file that I'm writing in, like app.py. okay, I don't want it to have a very different name. This is used when there is some error or there is some logging. Flask will use this name to show that error or logs that, okay, in app.py this happened, that happened. Okay, so that name is super useful from that perspective. And now I can just say I'm writing Flask after a long time, so I don't remember much, but let's see. Because Flask is easy, I'm hoping nothing will break. So now I'm just saying that if I go to /path, which is the default path, right? You go to this, but you run this particular function, and in this function I'll just say hello world. Okay, nothing fancy, hello world. So this is a Python decorator. What is a decorator? A decorator is basically a function that runs a function. Okay, so what basically is happening is this is a normal function. Okay, but if you think about this function literally does nothing. It just returns a string which is hello world. But if you run under it, under the decorator of app.root, it will make it this, that if somebody go to this particular thing, whatever the function under this returns is the response. Okay, is the response of the server. So now that's this normal function which is on 8 and 9 line, this is not a normal function anymore. This becomes a response of a request. Okay, so the request comes here and the response is this. Okay, and decorators are nothing but super simple things. It's a function that takes another function as the input. That's pretty much it. Okay, so app.root is actually just a function, and if you want to use a function as a decorator, you use the at the rate kind of thing. Okay, so think of this as, this is a function that takes two arguments. One is the path and second is the function itself. Okay, this is this function, and since we are using it in a decorator style, we use the at the rate. Okay, nothing to do with Flask but to do with Python. Okay, so this is just syntactic sugar of calling it more like app.root slash and then index, right? So think of it as if this was not there. Okay, I'll remove the comment. Think of it as this. Okay, and let's say you had this function index and then it just returns this, but now you want to overwrite index. So to overwrite, you have to say index equals to this. So index is just a variable name, but it is basically a function, right? That variable name is function name. So what is happening is we are saying that this is index, this is app.root, another function that takes two things. One is a path, okay, browser path, and I'll show you what it actually means. And this is the function, and we are overwriting the function's functionality, right? We are giving it HTTP kind of power, server kind of powers, right? So we have to change index behaviors. So we are taking a previous definition of the function, maintaining it, it does what it used to do, plus giving it more powers and renaming or basically repointing to a better definition. So it does the previous thing also, and it has server capabilities also. Okay, it sounds complex, but it is not that complex. But this is way better syntax, right? And if a function is below that @ kind of syntax, it basically becomes that kind of argument, and it does the same thing basically, right? And to do the slash, I will do one thing. Instead of slash, I'll say hello. Okay, and now I have defined one single route, that if you go to my server @/hello, it will return hello world. But the server is not running yet. That in this particular code, I haven't mentioned anywhere that I want to run it, right? So I can say app.run, and I can run it on the host. I want it to be available to anybody who is connected to my Wi-Fi, let's say, right? So I'll just say host is 0.0.0, and then I want to mention the port, right? So what's the date today? Today is 25 June. So I'll give it 2506. Okay, so I'm saying that on this particular port I want to run it. Okay, I'll show you on the default 80 port also, and I'll talk about that particular port. But let's do this first. Okay, so if you see it, if you remove the empty lines, this is more like 6-7 lines of code, and you have a server. It's a bogus server, obviously, not something dangerous or super difficult. So let's try to run this. So I'll just say Python app.py, right? And let's wait for it. So it's saying that this is a development server, do not use it in a production deployment, whatever, right? And then it says serving Flask app, okay, and debug mode is off, running on all addresses. See, it says running on all addresses. All addresses means basically it's available on all the interfaces. If you are connected to an Ethernet, then you can access this. If you're connected to a Wi-Fi, then you can access it. That's the meaning, right? And on localhost, you can access it as this. If you're not running on localhost, which is basically the same laptop we are running on, let's say I want to access it through my mobile, which is connected to the same Wi-Fi, I can just go to this. So it basically says that my private IP, the IP that has been given to me by the Wi-Fi, is this. Why is it running on this particular IP also? Because I mentioned 0.0.0, right? Because 0.0.0.0 has a special meaning when it comes to networking, right? So because I'm going to test it on my own laptop, I'll just go through this. Even if I go on this, it's the same thing, but first it will go to, it will basically not, it will first try to access the Wi-Fi and then come to my laptop to get the data. This is the shorter path. Okay, this particular path will not even go to network. It will just go till operating system and come back, because that's why it's called loop back, right? Don't go to the network, go and come back. That's why it's called loop back, localhost, right? So I'll copy this, and now I'll switch to Chrome. Here I am, and in the Chrome I'll just paste it. And if I go to this particular address, you'll see it says not found. It says not found is basically 404. So the server is running for sure, but it is saying that slash or the default path is not implemented, which is basically the slash path, right? Because we did not implement slash, we implemented only hello. So I'll go to hello and it says hello world, if you see, right? Sorry. So if you see the path, it is this, and it says hello world. So the server is running, and that's pretty much it, right? But when we go to websites, you will see that we normally do not write this colon particular port and this and that. The reason is, if you do not mention the particular port for the particular protocol, for example, the protocol here is HTTP. If you do not mention the port explicitly, HTTP default port, that is default by the internet standards, will be used. Okay, so if I don't mention it here 2506 and I'll just keep it /hello, you'll see it gives me an error because our HTTP port is 80 and I am not running on 80, right? I am running on 2506. So for this to work, I need to go and switch back to the terminal and make sure this actually runs. So I'll press Ctrl C to kill it, go back to my file and run on the port 80. Okay, the problem with port 80 is that any port which is less than 1024 as a number, you have to be sudo to run it. Okay, so if I do this, it says port 80 is used by another program, either identifier, stop that, or start service. So it's basically saying port 80 is running already, and I know why it's saying that. Actually I don't, because it should have been killed, because I killed my Docker. Your Docker is not running, so I doubt like where is port 80 running. Okay, let me just do sudo python app and let's see if yeah, so it's just a bogus, very bad kind of this one. Okay, it says address already in use, but it should have said actually that permission denied, because I'm not sudo. So it lets me run on 80, because if it was something was running on 80, it wouldn't have allowed me. So that's just bad error handling. So I'll now I'm pretty sure that on 80 it's running, right? So I'll go to Chrome. Okay, and if you see the address, you'll see that now it's 127.0.0.1, right? There is no colon 2500 or colon 80, right? So even if I do colon 80, you'll see that it will go back to without colon 80, right? Because that's anyways HTTP. Why it removes colon 80 part? Because that's a Chrome thing. Okay, it's just try to minimize the kind of URL you can have. It is not an HTTP thing. It's just like Chrome don't want you to mention the obvious port, right? This part, right? That's it. So that's the idea. I'm not going to push this code because this is stupid code, right? But I wanted to give you a taste of Flask, that and this is obviously super simple stuff. This is literally a hello world program, right? This is not complicated, but just to get started. Okay, let me do one more thing. So let's say I go to this particular file. Let me switch to terminal, and instead of this is right now just looks like a text, right? Let me say that I don't want to have this text, I want to have HTML instead. So I can have things like this. So I'm using multi-line string, right? That's why I use triple quotes, and I can say h1, this is awesome. Okay, and then close h1. And then save this, and I'll run this time on 2506, but because I do not want to run it on sudo. Okay, I have to change it inside the code. Let it be. I'll run on sudo only. Come back here, and you can see that Chrome has already reloaded it and it has become h1, right? So if I inspect this, you can see that okay, it's not. Okay, I just maximize it. Let me reload it then. Okay, now it is. So if you see, this is h1, right? As you can see, this is h1, right? So now you can actually literally have a blog, right? Although you would not like to have a blog where you so I'll switch on terminal again. Oh sorry, I was always on the terminal for you. So I'll go to Chrome, and you can see that this is what I have. Okay, when I reload, you get this, and you can confirm that this is a heading that we wrote. Now I'll go back to the terminal, and I'll kill my server, go back to the app, and instead of hard coding something like that, I'll use another thing from Flask, which is called render template. Okay, and I'll call this render template, and I'll call this hello.html. So now what I'm doing is, instead of writing the response itself, I'm saying that send this file. When somebody go to this particular part, send this file. And instead of having hello root, I'm going to change this root to slash, right? Now what I have done is that you don't have to write slash hello when somebody goes to just your server, which can be your website, right? Let's say your name is Amit Kumar and you have amitkumar.com. So somebody types amitkumar.com, they're by default on the slash path. So you want to show them hello.html file, right? So to do that, now I have to create a new folder. So I'll clear this, show you the folders I have, and then I'll create this folder which is called templates. Okay, I'll go to the templates folder and create hello.html file, and in that file I'm just going to say h1 hi I am Amit. Okay, save this, go back, make sure we have in the right folder. Since it's running on port 80, I'll say sudo python app. Okay, and now it's running. And now I go back here, and I'll switch to Chrome now. And if you see, I haven't reloaded anything. So if I go to hello now, it will say no, not found, because we haven't implemented that particular route. So I'll remove the hello part, do the enter, and you see that the template content is being rendered, and that is being sent right now, which is way more better code, because you're not writing your HTML content in your Python code, which will be very unreadable, right? And these templates have a lot of things, lot of features. Okay, you have variables, you have loops in the template, you can access Python stuff in those templates, and we'll see that. Okay, and it's called Jinja template. Okay, so if you go through the any Flask tutorial, you'll end up learning about all this. So this is what we are going to use for backend part, and then we will also use React part. I'm not covering any React part today, but we'll cover React part tomorrow. Okay, so for today, if you find this interesting, you can go through a small tutorial and learn as much Flask as you can and experiment in your own system. It's better if you have either Linux or Mac to do this, or if you can access Bash in your Windows, because I think Windows has Bash support from Windows 8 or 10. So have that kind of setup for yourself, and yeah, just experiment with Flask, because we are going to use Flask a lot, and I will be teaching you minor things. For example, when you go to a Flask tutorial, you'll find that few of the things that I mentioned here you will not find in the tutorials, but I feel that those are super important things for beginners, because normally when people teach programming languages or a framework, they think that you already know stuff, but you don't know this particular programming language, or you do not know this particular framework. But if that's your first framework or first language, there are things that are need to be mentioned, right? So that's why I mentioned those things, so that it becomes easier for you. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Now I'll just take questions if you have any, and then end this discussion. We'll have tomorrow's session same time, and we'll talk about the UI part. And when we work on the UI part for a day or two, we'll take a pause, and on the third or fourth day, we'll have this. We'll go back to the Flask code and start from scratch and create our mock APIs that I was talking about, because you will see that we will be at the level where our UI needs those mock APIs to connect to. Okay, so that's the plan. So for this week, we'll be implementing the admin API and admin UI part, not just the mock API, the proper API. So whole this week we'll be doing these sessions, most probably at 4. If the time changes, I'll let you know. And that's the whole idea. Let me know if you have any confusions or anything like that. And I'll just like. Can you please share some resources to learn Flask? I am kind of left overwhelmed. Yes, you'll be overwhelmed if you have never learned backend. Okay, is OOP necessary to learn before learning Flask? Not at all. You need like 0 OOPs. Okay, the decorator part is the only syntax which you will find little difficult. Other than that, all you have to do is write functions and tell that this is the root and this is the response. That's the only thing you have to do. Okay, so Flask is super easy in that sense. The second thing is tutorial wise, I will just say that go for YouTube, go find some tutorials or read the Flask documentation and try and experiment thing. This overwhelming experience will only go away when you do this thing on your own. I also talked about a few things when it comes to networking. For example, port 80, or you need sudo for ports less than 1024, or 0.0.0 and different interfaces you can access through Wi-Fi and all these things. Nobody will mention that in a Flask tutorial, but and nobody mention these things, I think, in any tutorials, and you will eventually know either from people who you work with, senior people, or people who are good at network kind of stuff and all those things. But this is important stuff, so this should help you. So you can always come back, do one thing, go for this, just repeat what I did and try to experiment with what I have created, and then go for a tutorial, so that your this overwhelm thing reduce a little bit. And that's pretty much it. Can there be more than one Vnv in one folder? You can have more than one virtual environment in a single folder, but it doesn't make sense because you will be end up working only on one. So it doesn't make sense. You can have like hundreds of them. Doesn't make sense. CS50 web development will be very overwhelming because they cover nearly almost all the things, including SQL Alchemy, at a very high speed, and you will be overwhelmed. So don't go for CS50 web development if this is overwhelming for you. Okay, go for CS50 web development course when you have at least 6 months of experience with Flask and related stuff. So yeah, don't go there. You will be like another level of overwhelmed. Go for something simple YouTube tutorial, which don't overwhelm you, and you try the basic stuff. Noman Khan is saying that input output section like drivers and stubs. Yes, it is like that, but very different thing, because driver and stub is more like a testing thing, where mock is more like a development thing. Okay, I think that's pretty much it then. I don't see much questions. So go for Flask documentation and go for some tutorials. I'm not sure Code with Harry channel. I have no comments on that. I do not know if it's good or bad. You try. You decide for yourself. Go for any YouTube tutorial. See what works for you. Go for blogs if blogs work for you. Sometimes I have seen it for myself personally that blogs makes more sense because I can just follow step by step way more better with blogs. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Bye, take care guys, and you can always use Discord for further discussions about these things. Thank you for watching.